They say that you're the one that's in demand, and I don't know the score. And all the times that you have tried to play the game, trying to have things your own way, it's led to nothing and things still remain the same. And I don't wanna play. So you see that this is not the way to be, and the time has come to choose. If it comes down to a fight between you and me, then you are doomed to lose.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Night Live. Tonight we are joined by some very special guests from the RMT, one of our favourite unions. We've done little bits and bobs with the RMT in the past, and obviously some of you will recognise some of the people on this panel. So I'm going to go straight into the introductions. The first of them, I'm going to come to you, Jane. So Jane is going to be our... some of you will recognise Jane from previous shows. Jane is going to be doing our comments section tonight and also coming in with her absolutely brilliant, well-rounded opinions as always. How are you doing, Jane?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for having me on here. It's really nice to meet Steve, and it's good to see Cat again, because as someone who's caught a lot of trains in my life, I'm really glad the RMT is standing up for this. You know, it's been important for the passengers as well. So thank you.
And you're always welcome on here. And now we have Cat again, another familiar face. Cat, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you. I'm good. You keeping well, Paul?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I'm okay. I look like a child at the moment. I look about 8.
I like it. I'm
did a
liking the
shave.
clean look. Suits you.
Yeah. So
I've
when you're,
followed suit on my head.
it's good. Yeah, it's good looks all around here. There's a lot less hair going on than there normally would be on Socialist Night Live. So that's it. That's got to be a good thing for tonight, anyway. Maybe we'll get more. We've had some hairy people on over the course of the series, and me included. So yeah, a little bit more clean cut tonight. But I do like that. I do like the shaved head. It looks really good.
Thank you.
Yeah. And also for the first time we've got Steve Headley. So really pleased to have you on, Steve. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much for the invite. I'm the Senior Assistant General Secretary of the RMT. I'm a socialist. I'm a revolutionary, and well, we're just lining up, I think, for one of the biggest battles in our union's history, and perhaps in the history of the recent history of the working class.
Okay, so what an introduction that is. So what is this? What is this biggest battle? Because I suppose like you can't say that without us immediately exploring what this biggest battle is. And I'm like, this is the kind of talk I like to hear as well, because I think we've been on the back foot as socialists in a lot of the left, but not in other parts of the left. And I would include RMT in one of the places where we're really not on the back foot. So what is this? What is this big battle coming up?
Well, first of all, I'll just sort of lightly, briefly introduce the whole ethos of the RMT and our rule book. It makes it quite clear. Rule 1, Clause 4, that we're out for socialism. We want to replace the capitalist system with socialism and have a socialist society. So I'd like to think that guides all our actions. But the battle that's going to be coming up pretty soon, and actually it's upon us now in many ways, is that all Network Rail and all the train operating companies and London Underground are using the cloud of COVID, the sort of the excuse of COVID to come for jobs, thousands of jobs, drive out coach and horses through the terms and conditions that people have, and attack pensions. And I'll give you a quick example of the pensions. If there's a small company called Hull Trains, and if you've worked for them for 20 years, and you earn 30 grand, you'll get 800 quid a month when you retire. The stuff that they want to bring in, the pension that they want to bring in, will reduce that to 375 quid a month. So you'll lose over half your pension, and you'll lose a 20 grand lump sum. So that's a sort of a tax that are coming our way. At the same time, of course, the government have bailed out these companies the over £10 billion during the pandemic. And incredibly, 1.5 billion of that 10 billion has gone straight into their coffers of the shareholders of these companies. These are people that haven't worked through the pandemic like our members. And many of our members on Network Rail and the train operating companies have suffered a 2-year pay freeze, whilst the shareholders have sat at home, in the comfort of their living rooms, and they've picked up £1.5 billion in shares. And our members have had enough of it. So on top of that, not only do they want to make our members' lives a misery at work, but they want to make them a misery when they retire. They want to have them living in poverty in the old age. So that's the situation we're faced with. And we've had a mass meeting of all our senior reps down in London last week. And they've unanimously said that enough's enough and they're going to go against it. Now, I'll finish on this point. For those of your viewers who are old enough to remember 1989, what we had the trains, we had the tube, and then we had the buses all out together. And with the government intent on slashing the budget of TfL again, and we see that there's more negotiations, and every time there's more negotiations, the government demand more cuts. I think we're going to have that same situation, because we're going to have the RMT on strike on the tubes and on the trains. And I hope that Sharon Graham and Unite, she sounds very good. She's saying all the right things. But I really hope she steps up to the plate, and the Unite Union step up to the plate, so we can bring London to a halt, and indeed the country to a halt, if that's what's needed. And this isn't just for transport workers, this is for all workers out there, because we see the NHS, we see the teachers, we see the university lecturers, we see the cleaners all under attack. And I really wish, and I hope we do get to the stage where we just break the anti-trade union laws like people did in the 70s, and you would have rail workers and building workers going on strike for nurses and losing the medical profession so they could keep going to work. We would go on strike for them. So that would be the ideal scenario. But I think I hope I've outlined what sort of really quite titanic clashes are coming our way pretty soon.
That's what is it that stops people from doing that? I kind of know the answer to this one, but I think a lot of people at home might not understand why it is that we haven't seen the likes of teachers coming out for other teachers. Now, I'm a teacher trade unionist, and I've had people from other unions in a specific school crossing our picket line to go into work when we've been on strike and things like that. So why is it that there used to be a lot of solidarity action, didn't there? They used to, and I think in the USA as well, that was quite a strong thing, wasn't it? Where different unions would be trade union sisters and go out on strike at the same time as one another. So why does that not happen?
Well, we've been trained, haven't we? We've been trained by this government, and the unions have been threatened with a sequestration of the funds. As Tony Blair boasted, we've got the most restrictive anti-trade union laws in Europe. And what happens is that if there's solidarity action, if we don't agree with the ballots, if we don't agree not to take action whenever workers in strike, the unions are sequestrated, their funds are taken off them. But that shouldn't stop workers fighting back. And I think the latest tranche of anti-trade union laws, which want to make us in the transport industry actually agree to a number of scabs. We have to have a percentage of scabs to make a strike legal. That's not been implemented yet, but that's on the drawing board. If that happens, that's a step too far for me. I think we've got to have, even if the union bureaucracies aren't prepared to break the law, I think we've got to have rank and file organisations that can break the law and take on these anti-trade union laws, because I think it inhibits workers for fighting and winning in a lot of cases. The fact that we've got to wait months, really, because we have to give them notice, we have to give them 2 weeks of a notice of a ballot, we've got to then have the ballot, we've got to then give them 2 weeks notice of actions. We're months down the line before things can actually take place. And in a lot of cases, if we had an immediate response, we'd win a lot sooner. So the bosses know that, and that's why they've brought in the anti-union laws. And we as the working class, our consciousness has been knocked back by decades, I think. And we've got to rebuild that consciousness. And if we want tactics to win, I think we need to break anti-union laws.
That's good fighting talk. So, Cat, as someone who would be like on the front line of this, can you describe the difference between, like, Steve's the senior assistant general secretary of the union, and what are you in the RMT?
Yes, so Steve and I have known each other many, many years. So Steve's is employed, his wage comes from the RMT. My wage comes from my employer, and I work on public transport. I work on London Underground, and I'm a health and safety rep. I've been in this show and talked about that before. And I mean, I'll sketch it how it works in the London transport region. So we have branches, and in those branches you have positions. So you have branch officials and you have reps, and reps cover areas. And what I've been doing for the last 3 years as a senior rep is I've been on full-time release. But so as a rep, my wages from my employer. So what I'm expecting through my letterbox next week will be a ballot that is being sent out to all RMT members who work for TfL. And our ballot opens on Monday, and I think it closes on the 10th of January. So what we will do is we will return our ballot. We'll be campaigning in our workplaces for people to vote yes for strike action and action short of a strike. Those ballots will be counted. Hopefully we'll smash the anti-trade union laws, which are designed to obstruct our right to lawfully withdraw our labour or otherwise. And then we'll be all out. As somebody who has done my fair share of picket lines over the years, and we were having this conversation just before the show started, it's picket lines can be different depending on your employer and your workplace. They're not all the same. They're not uniform. So, for example, on the tube, with the night tube strikes that's going on, I know Steve's going on a picket line later tonight, and we'll have 4 lines out next weekend as well. So it's 2 lines out this weekend, 4 next weekend. Picket lines start when people start work, and the tube, starts quite early. So you have drivers booking on at 4:15, 4:30 in the morning. And the point of a picket line is to encourage people not to cross it. So that means your picket line has to be there before the first booked on duty. So that's why, we get up at 3:30 in the morning to get ourselves down, and our picket lines are from 4:30 in the morning. I mean, the way strikes work is the times that they begin can chop and change depending on what is trying to be achieved. But, there's nothing particularly glamorous at standing outside Wembley Park Depot at 4:30 in the morning, but that's where I'm going to be next week. And that's the right place. And it's and just for clarity on night tube, it's not my grade. I represent station staff that's going out on strike. But we're an all grades union, and of course I am going to be there showing complete solidarity to that picket line. And it was so good to see so many from my branch. The branch I'm a member of is called Neasden branch. We had signallers, train drivers, station staff, cleaners, people from the local community, Brent, local councillors come down, you know, and some of them were 5 a.m. But the first people I saw on that picket line, other than my friends, was the police, who drove up in their car, asked for the named picket line supervisor and asked for their reference, you know, and that can be an intimidating experience if you don't know that that's coming. So that's what it's really like, stood shivering at 4:30 in the morning outside Wembley Park Depot having a chat with a couple of coppers.
So you've just described something there, and I think like that'll be familiar to people who have been on strike and things like that, but there's some people who maybe have got sympathy with people or otherwise, maybe they don't know any of this stuff. Maybe they don't know, like, so you've mentioned like what you mentioned a picket line. What is a picket line? What is it?
So, well, there's some government guidance, but I wouldn't take that as the definition of what a picket line is. It's a gathering of workers who have lawfully balloted for strike action, who are withdrawing their labour, and they are there present in or just outside of their workplace. You normally have to stand right outside of it. You can't be on the premises, and you're there to prevent people crossing that picket line. You're there to ask people to show solidarity. You're there to be a visual and visceral reminder of what is happening, and you're also there to represent your class as workers, you know. So a picket line is lots of things, but the main purpose of it is to stop people coming into work and to withdraw their labour in solidarity with you. That's the point of it.
Yeah, the only thing I would say there is what Cat's described as an official picket line. Of course, picket lines don't have to be official. The Liverpool Dockers, for example, was a strike that was unofficial. What you had is temporary workers, people who worked for an agency who were sacked, and they set up a picket line, and the Dockers refused to cross that picket line. So that 2.5 years of action was actually unofficial action. It was never condoned by their trade union. And it was a tremendous struggle, and it was a struggle that united not just the working class in this country, but right across the world, really. We had people from Europe, we had people from America, Australia, all coming and supporting the Liverpool Dockers, sending donations, spreading the news about what was happening to them. So a picket line is any gathering of workers, any worker that's been sacked or any worker that's in dispute with their employers, setting up outside their place of work, and asking people not to cross that picket line because they're in dispute.
I've got a couple of ideas for other questions, but I've noticed that, as always, we've got some good comments coming in. So, Jane, could you address a couple of the comments, and Quantum Skyline in particular? But would you mind having a look at a couple of the comments that you've spotted so far?
Yeah, Neil's mentioned, just going back to what was said previously about Sharon Graham unites his union. It's my union as well, actually, and Neil and me both hope that she will be standing with the RMT on this. And Neil said, obviously, a good trade unionist never crosses a picket line. But Quantum Skyline's got a question here. Do you think the media don't really represent striking staff fairly by explaining why the workers need to strike? All we seem to hear about is the disruption it will cause and negative responses from the public. Would you say that's the case?
100% that's the case. Easy.
Well, the media are controlled by billionaires who are businessmen and businesswomen, and I suppose they are businessmen. They're the ones that control the media, and they hate us. They hate the fact that we're organising workers, and workers are fighting back against people from their class. If you're a billionaire, you don't want to lose any money by uppity workers demanding more money, demanding a work-life balance, and not to be working crazy shifts all over the place. You want the opposite of that, so you don't want to be dealing with trade unions. So anything that disrupts their money-making facilities will suffer the full wrath of their organisations, and that's what we do. We don't expect fairness. We don't expect fairness. I mean, I grew up in the north of Ireland, as you can probably hear from my accent, but unlike many people in this country, I never seen the BBC as impartial. I never saw them as impartial. I grew up with the BBC presenting a very skewed picture So I never harbored any illusions about the media in this country. And I can tell you, they're absolutely bent. You know, you don't get a fair reflection from anybody.
Yeah, I remember, like, say, it's funny when people say things like that. I remember a BBC journalist who interviewed me before, and I said afterwards, "Are we going to get a fair crack here?" And this journalist was honest. She was great. She said, "Depends on the editor. Depends what the editor wants it to say." It says, "I've done it as fairly as I can, but who knows?" And that was the people who worked for the organisation there saying that, yeah, this could get spun whichever way we want to spin it. And that was a bit of an eye-opener.
Well, to be quite honest, if anybody had any illusions about the BBC, look at the way they treated Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, here was a man that fought all his life against racism, who'd stood outside synagogues when the far right were trying to threaten synagogues. And all of a sudden, he was threatening the power and the privilege and the wealth of the ruling elite in this country. And all of a sudden, the BBC went out of its way to portray this picture of him as an anti-Semite. Now, if that doesn't wake people up to the absolute joke that the BBC is, the absolute joke that they pretend to be, that they're impartial, I don't think anything will. And that's in the 21st century, isn't it? That's the 21st century. So that's the degree of control that the establishment have over the state propaganda organ, which is the BBC.
Absolutely. So we've got you talked about disruption there. So I guess the whole point of a strike, the power that you have as a worker, is demonstrated through a strike, isn't it? Because there's a famous case of the bankers in Ireland going on strike, isn't there? The people who were not the people who worked in banks. Actually, I think it was to an extent, but the bankers went on strike in Ireland for a while, and nothing happened. There was no disruption. There was nothing really happened, so they went back to work. But if you've got someone like a transport worker goes on strike, you know about it. If you work on the bins and you go on strike, people know about it, don't they? People understand that is hugely disruptive. And I think, would you agree that like a strike is a way to demonstrate who really does the work, who does the important work in the country, who, like the people who without them the country would grind to a halt? And is that part of the reason as well why the media is so desperate to fight against people who go on strike?
I mean, we saw that in Glasgow, didn't we? COP26, when you had the cleanser workers and you had RMT members take strike action, and Boris sit next to David Attenborough without a face mask. And you also saw those beautiful, beautiful images of people joining the picket line in solidarity. I was really moved by that. And I really hope that's not a one-time thing, because that kind of solidarity matters, and it carries and it builds energy. And you know what? The best thing you can do if you don't understand or you're annoyed about not, for example, on the tube, not being able to get to work or get your kid to school, come and speak to us. Come on our picket line. We'll have a chat. We don't have to be best friends, but come and get to know us and understand what it is we're fighting for and why it's got to this point, because the whole point of strike action means everything else before that has failed. We don't start there, we end up there, and we only end up there when bosses don't negotiate with us fairly, or we're being treated unfairly, and we decide collectively as working class people to not stand for it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think strikes do show where the power in society lies, who actually does the work, as indeed the pandemic did. We had the bosses and the bankers and the stockbrokers all working from home, and we had the manual workers and those who ran the transport industry, and the refuge workers and the National Health, who did a fantastic job. Many hundreds of them perished in doing that job, and that is the industrial strength, the working class, if you like, who keep the country running, and they are the important people in this country. The one thing I would raise, and this is what I think people, Cat mentioned COP26. Public transport is the greenest form of transport without any doubt, the greenest form of transport. If you want to take motorists off the road, then you encourage people to use the trains, the tubes, the buses, and trams, whatever. And the cuts that the government have lined up across the spectrum of public transport are absolutely enormous. Absolutely enormous. They're talking about 10%, at least 10% cuts. And what will that do? It'll exacerbate the climate crisis. We've got this. We're told that as socialists that we're crazy. We don't understand. We're stupid somehow. But yet we have this system which is supposed to be eminently sensible, has brought us all to the brink of destruction, and seeks to accelerate that by driving people back into their cars. I mean, that's the reality of it. They want to cut public transport, the greenest form of transport, and drive people back into their polluting cars. So, I mean, I think that there's no joined up thinking in this government. That's quite obvious anyway. But it's worth pointing out that, the environment that we're all dependent on needs public transport. It needs cheap public transport so people don't use their cars.
With regards to public transport, the whole idea is it's public transport, isn't it? It's meant to be there based on need. What effect have you seen of people we have an awful time in the northeast where people might need to get to a job interview and they live in a village, but they don't have a bus route that goes through their village because it's not profitable. What's caused that? What's caused the problems of us having not enough bus routes, not enough public transport? Because I know Cat, you're London based, aren't you? But you understand this, and you understand the Yorkshire side of it as well, from how poor the services can be there as well. So what causes that kind of problem?
Well, it's deregulation. What happened is you used to have public transport authorities, and they would have profitable routes, and they would have routes that were not so profitable or maybe loss-making routes. And the profitable routes would have cross-subsidized the routes that were not profitable. But what happened when it was privatized, you had private companies coming in, and basically they dropped the non-profitable routes. So if you're living in a village, tough luck. They can't afford to run 4 buses a day to that village anymore, because that doesn't make a profit. But what they can do is have more in the city centre where people are using them more frequently. They'll run those routes because they make money out of them. And that, in a nutshell, what happened with bus deregulation. And that's why you've got such poor transport. And of course, again, I mean, we're all waiting for the Northern Powerhouse. I think that's been put back by a couple of decades now. But I have to say, anybody was daft enough to have voted for the Tories for the fact that they were going to do anything for the North. I mean, these people don't care about anything north of Watford. That's reality. As long as they can sew up south of Watford, they know that they've got the majority that they need in Parliament. So if people were sort of conned into that, more fool them. But yeah, that's the problem: deregulation and privatisation.
Thanks for that, Jane. We've got a few comments coming in, and also if you want to put any opinions in here as well, Jane, you're very valuable as well.
Thank you. I always want to put opinions in. So, yes, we've had quite a lot of really good comments. So Neil's been really good tonight. Everyone's been very good, but Neil's been very, very good. So Neil wanted to ask what Steve and Cat think about the police crime court sentencing bill and how that could impact on picketing and strike action. I know that's a big question itself. I just wanted to say that this is about passenger safety too, because I've felt unsafe on several occasions catching public transport before, and cutting staff from the stations and transport is going to make your travel much more stressful. It's going to make you less safe as a passenger. So the staff are doing this for everyone's sake. It's not just for their better conditions, but for ours. And also I wanted to say, what about the disruption to the lives of the staff? Because actually I was reading today what the proposals are that the staff are up against, and it's absolutely disgusting what's being suggested. And I think if any one of us who have a nice office job were asked to suddenly start working nights from next week, and turn our life upside down and be told that, so many people are going to be made redundant and we'll just cover it, we wouldn't be happy about it. And it's not fair to treat people like that. but I will let some other people get some comments in. Mia has meant just to say they shame people for using cars, but what's the alternative when you don't have affordable or accessible public transport available to you? And so many people don't. London's obviously a much better place for that than other areas, but a lot of places in the country are really bad. And Quantum Skyline was wanting to ask about working relationships after a strike action, whether successful or not so successful, and whether people have fears about strained relationships if they after that when they return to work, if they do support the strike, if that plays a role. So that's a lot of questions there for you. Sorry.
I'll jump on the night shift one just briefly. I'm a health and safety rep, so it's something I know a little bit about. And doing night shift work shortens your life. Literally, it shortens your life. And doing rotational night shift work. So by that I mean, like my shift pattern that I'll be going back to in January is earlys, lates, and nights. So that's rotational. So having a big set of nights, I do 7 night shifts in a row. It impacts your health more greatly than if you were doing permanent nights, for example. But both of those things shorten your life. We work extreme shifts, as I said earlier, with drivers booking on at 4:30 in the morning, dead early starting at 5 in the morning, dead lates finishing at 1, 2 in the morning. It does, that fatigue has an impact. But also just briefly in regards to Kill the Bill, I think I've been on this show before when I've been at the Kill the Bill protests, our union and London Transport Region. We've even got banners made, are very much in opposition to it. And we have to be so sharply aware of how many things are threatened by that, and some of which are beyond the power at which we can control by protest on the street, and some of which it threatens everybody, and it is a specific threat to trade unionists taking industrial action.
I think I completely agree with Cat, but I think the bigger picture is this: we're moving towards a totalitarian state. The attacks on civil liberties, and again, a lot of them carried out under the cover of COVID, are quite startling. The right to protest, the right to peacefully protest, is now in jeopardy. It really is. And I think that, whether you agree with our tactics or not, people like Extinction Rebellion are actually there putting their money where their mouth is. They're prepared to take, I'd imagine, quite what people would consider extreme actions, gluing themselves to roads to stop cars going through. But then, what's extreme is somebody gluing themselves to a road to stop climate catastrophe. Is that extreme? When as one of your questioners said, the government are driving people into polluting cars by not giving them access to public transport. We all know the ice caps are melting. We all know that by 2030, large sections of London will be flooded regularly. The rest of the country is the same. And they're criminalising protest. So I think that it's very, very important that we as trade unionists see that that's going to be used against us as well. Absolutely used against us. The work-life balance thing, yeah. Again, Kat's got that spot on. How dare they think that they can get rid of thousands of jobs and then destroy the lives of people who are left by saying, well, you're going to have to work every weekend. Some people are divorced; they don't see their children except at weekends and holidays, and they're being told, "Well, tough luck. You'll just have to wait until it's a school break or something like that. The school holidays. You won't be able to see your kids during the week, or try a weekend." So, there's a lot of things at play, but I think the main thing is about relationships. Look, every trade unionist knows as soon as they go on strike, especially reps, they've got a target on their back. They've got a target on their back, and management are going to go for them. I was sacked when I was a rep more than once, and that's something we deal with. But at the end of the day, we're in a war, and when you're in a war, there's going to be casualties. And if people hate the sight of me when I go on strike, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing, because they'll be seeing a lot of me. I'm not going to give up. I'm still going to be there. And if they can't deal with that, then that's up to them.
With regards to, you talked there about like the police and crime bill. And I was talking to someone about this the other day, and I'll give you a bit of context here. Like, as a teacher, I've noticed that when we go really, really draconian and start to make everything a rule break, sometimes they think, well, you know, if if having the wrong colour shoes on is going to be a big deal, I might as well not wear any uniform at all. Do we think that, like, coming down on us really, really hard and criminalising things that have been civil liberties for years and years and years, do you think it'll form some sort of backlash? Do you think, like, more and more ordinary people might think, actually, if I'm going to get really into trouble, if I'm going to get 51 weeks for having some glue in my pocket, which could potentially be used to glue myself to my friend, should I go further? You know, is it worth going further if that's going to be what happens to me if I do something that's pretty minor?
But the thing is, it's going to be used selectively, isn't it? I mean, they're not going to use it on everybody. They haven't used the anti-trade union laws on everybody. They'll use it selectively. So what they'll do is they'll pick out examples. They'll pick out people who are known for their views, who are known to be in opposition to the government, who are known leaders in trade union movements and rank and file movements, who are known in protest movements, and they'll go for them. They make an example out of them. I mean, they attacked Extinction Rebellion. They gave them those massive uncalled for sentences because they were actually having an effect. They were getting into the press. They weren't being able to keep them out of the press because it was causing disruption. And there you go, nail them to the cross, make people look at them and go, that's what's going to happen to you if you don't obey. And that's their strategy.
And there is a past to this, you know, and I've spoken before on the show about my anti-fracking activism, but back in 2015, 2016, in my parents' village, people were getting arrested using a section of the Trade Union and Labour Relations Act. My apologies if I've got that wrong. So you had environmental activists having that act used against them. And what I saw the police do, I saw them do, was pick out the people they thought were the leaders and then tell them that they couldn't go within a mile of that site. And then the charges would get dropped some months later, but they would have prevented somebody who they saw as key from being there. And what we've gone almost full circle to now we've seen the police crime and sentencing bill come through, bringing in all of these things. And Steve nailed it on the head before, you know, according to the Human Rights Act, our right to protest, our lawful right to peacefully protest, but also, to be very specific, peaceful doesn't mean quiet. Peaceful can be disruptive. Peaceful can be noisy. Peaceful can be angry. The word when you hear it, and it gets said a lot in the debates about the right to peacefully protest. That doesn't mean we're sat here really, really quiet like mice in a really polite line. And I think we need to value as a society the right to be angry and the right to agitate.
Brilliant. Jane, any comments?
Neil says that the act was TULCRA 1992.
That's it. Thanks, Nick.
And he's also mentioned he remembers a live stream that Steve did. Is it from the DOO strike or the DO strike? In a meeting with managers, they called the police on you because they didn't want to negotiate with you, which is shameful.
That was actually during a cleaners representation. And what they do with cleaners is absolutely vile, because a lot of cleaners, English isn't their first language, and a lot of them are worried about their immigration status and things like that. So what they'll do is they'll call them into an office and they'll ask them to sign new contracts, which are, worsen their terms and conditions and basically save the management money. And they didn't they didn't tell us as a union that they were even doing this. So we got tipped off by cleaners, and I went in there to represent people. And they ended up calling the police to try to get me removed from the meeting. So I was saying to the police, well, these people are breaking the law. Why are you not arresting them? And eventually they abandoned the meeting, but they did, obviously the first resort was not to have a sit down and talk to the trade union. It was they call the police and intimidate the cleaners into signing new contracts. And that goes on all the time. It goes on all the time.
Shocking. That's so shocking. I'm disappointed that the police didn't tell them to go away when they called as well.
Well, the police are an arm of the state. I mean, again, I hate to spoil anybody's illusions, but the police are not on your side. They're not. They're on the side of the people that run the country, and they will hit you over the head if they're told they hit you over the head by the people that run this country. That's who the police are.
Frightening times then with the government we've got at the moment, because I think the government we've got at the moment is quite happy for them to bash us over the head quite a lot.
Well, to be fair, the Labour government were quite happy to do the same thing. I haven't known any government that haven't been prepared to do that.
Actually, we had a comment, I think, from Paul Smith mentioned that he's not actually hopeful that we'd see a lot of improvements in public transport under the current Labour leadership. I don't know if we want to get into that kind of thing.
I mean, look, we can dig into that, and I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but I do think Andy McDonald's manifesto when he was the Shadow Transport Minister was a decent bit of work that the Labour engine didn't even promote, by the way. But yeah, I don't think that exists now. I think we've got a different shadow rail minister now, and Shapps, who is the Secretary of State for transport, is a massive Bojo Brown nose, and he's got his eyes on a different prize. He's going to do what he's told. That's it, and we've got the situation we have in London, in which we have a Tory government falling out with a so-called Labour mayor, and the workers, of which I am one, are caught in the middle of this politicking, and the mayor has a very clear choice. He sides with the Tories or he sides with workers, and at the moment, I believe he's making the wrong choice.
How just as RMT people, how did that make you feel when he put out that tweet saying, basically casting the RMT and the people who are going on strike, the people who work in that place, as being some kind of enemy to the rest of everyone else? How did that feel?
I mean, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised that that's what came out of Sadiq's mouth, but I was angry. Of course I was. I'm a human being. I have feelings, and I'm a worker. And what he said, I took as being personally insulting. But I wasn't surprised. I mean, I'm pretty sure Livingston did it, by the way. Boris always did it, but when he was mayor. Livingston did it when he was mayor, So he's not the first. He probably won't be the last.
Well, we don't actually have a party of Labour, do we? We don't have a party that represents working class people. There was the Corbyn revolution, and we've had the counter revolution. And the counter revolution has made it quite clear that Starmer's a safe pair of hands. He's not going to challenge the power or the money or the influence of the people that run this country, the corporations and the vested interests. And he's lining up a meek second 11. For when the Tories maybe go under a tsunami of sleaze. I think there's probably people in the ruling class going, well, look, Starmer's a safe pair of hands, whereas Boris Johnson is a bit of a maverick. That in many ways I think there's sections of the ruling class in this country who would prefer Starmer, because he is just going to do nothing. It's going to be business as usual for capitalism. It's going to be a tax on the workers as usual. He's Muppet Sadiq Khan in London has carried on a fantastic Labour tradition of attacking workers in struggle. I mean, Sadiq should be out leading if he was anything to do with the working class. And, he always refers to his dad being a bus driver. He'd be out defending transport workers on the picket lines with us, fighting the government, but he's not doing that. He's attacking them.
Do you think people are politically missing a trick there? Because I always think, even from a point of view of, I don't know, if you're being really, really cynical and you just wanted votes, the Tories are going after working class votes, and they're going after it in a variety of ways, as we know. They're going about it because of perceived racism of the working class, which I think is a complete lie, by the way. I don't think working class people are any more racist than any other section of society, possibly less so. But, they go after that kind of rhetoric and stuff to try and court working class voters. Why isn't a mainstream political party going after the votes of people who work? And people, it's almost like this, the ruling class are doing you a favour, the management class are doing you a favour by given you a job. You're quite lucky to have a job and work for someone else. That seems to be the mantra going through like every section of political society. Why is no one taking advantage of the fact that actually if you say to workers, I'm going to give you a much better deal and I'm going to be on your side, there's a lot of votes in workers. Most people are workers rather than most people being management bosses. Why aren't people doing that?
There is a side to that which a lot of people, workers, don't understand. That a lot of workers, I suppose the classic term for it is false consciousness, which is they believe that they've got more in common with the managers and their aspirations, that they want to be in the managerial class maybe. But you're right. I mean, fundamentally, your point's correct. I mean, there's far more of us than there are of them. And why doesn't a party stand up and say that? Well, I mean, to be fair, Corbyn, in essence, in 2017 did. I mean, the massive betrayal that most people thought that Corbyn performed was when he said he capitulated to people like Starmer and McDonald and Abbott, amongst others. Let's not beat about the bush. Who said that they wanted another referendum. And, when 2017, he said he would abide by the result of a referendum, no matter what it was, people believed him. And then when he changed his tune, people didn't believe him. And it's things like the renationalisation of the railway, the bus companies, all that, simply wouldn't have been possible if we'd maintained membership of the European Union. So, Labour was stuck in a real contradiction. And to be quite honest, Corbyn bottled it. He bottled it on several fronts. That was one of them. He also bottled it because he let good comrades be hounded out of the Labour Party and did nothing. And he let them be fed to the wolves one by one. And of course, the wolves eventually came and ate him. So a failure of leadership is the answer.
Is it also like a failure of like how we're communicating with people as well? Again, I think a lot of unions almost become a little bit professional. I saw it certainly in teaching. I sometimes think there's a tendency for people to start to behave like the bosses a little bit, and it within the union, and they want to look like they're on an equal footing to the bosses, and they dress like the bosses and stuff. That I always respect a union rep that goes in just like wearing the clothes they want to wear, and they don't try and look like someone who was trying to get elected in 1997. So I'm all for that.
I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think there are different sections of the working class as well, and a lot of working class people have been brought up being told that what they are is wrong and they should aspire to be middle class. And a lot of skilled workers and other workers have bought into that. They bought into that, mindset that what they are is wrong. It's not an enviable thing to be working class. They shouldn't be proud of being working class. They should aspire to be middle class. And I think there are also in the RMT and in other unions who are completely contrary to that. We're very proud of being working class. And, the way we dress and the way we talk to bosses is the way we talk to you tonight, That's not always popular with certain sections of our membership either, I have to tell you.
And how we are as community, because the support that, like London Transport Region, we're a pretty tight bunch of folk. Doesn't mean we all agree, but, but we are there for each other, whether that's fleet, engineering, trains, stations, revenue grades, cleaners, you name it, and London Transport, we're something like 11,000 something strong, but it is through that community, through participating in our branches, through meeting, through showing solidarity to other people's causes, in which we continue to understand and see each other and understand what those struggles are. So those relationships are absolutely key. It's not just about knowing your enemy. You need to really know your friends too. I know how to do my job. I know how to run a tube station. You tell me to fix a train, I wouldn't have a clue. And if there's a dispute going on with fleet, I'm going to go to their branch. I'm going to go and chat and ask them what that's about. And that helps me to understand. So the ability to be community is absolutely vital.
Brilliant. Jane, anything coming in?
Yeah.
Or have you got any opinions as well? I want to hear your opinion too.
Oh, no, no, I've got loads of opinions. I'll let some other people have a turn for a little bit. Um, Mia, I thought made a really good point before. She was saying now how our basic human emotions like anger, fear, and sadness, which are very understandable in the situations such as the situation the RMT staff find themselves in at the moment, they're a reaction to injustice and abuses, but they're portrayed often in the media as, instability or a danger rather than looking at them as a logical reaction and looking at what's causing them, what are the injustices, what are the abuses, and how do we address those. The media's reaction is to try and shut up the people who are being affected rather than let the public know what's causing it, really. Then Andy Burnham, I think it was Neil that mentioned that Andy Burnham is bringing the buses in Manchester into public ownership, which is fantastic. Then Paul Smith mentioned that one problem that we have in this country, a big problem, is a lack of political education, and that we really need that for working people so they can understand a bit better what's going on and the way we're being played by the establishment and the media. And Neil made a comment about the fact that the establishment don't want the working classes to vote. They don't want to take away the right to vote. So they just want to demoralise people and think there's nothing to vote for. It's in their interest that people can't be bothered to vote because they think we're all the same. And the voter ID that's coming in is yet another hurdle they can put in the way of people, feeling like they want to engage politically.
I mean, I think political education is absolutely key. Same with lifelong learning. I did the RMT political school probably 8-9 years ago, and it profoundly informed what my politics is now, and the ability for unions to run those courses must not be constrained. It already has been, by the way. We've losing the government funding for union learning reps, for example, but lifelong political education is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it depends what you mean by political education. I think that some unions run courses, and we're quite guilty of this as well. I think we bring people down to Parliament and give them a tour of Parliament, and that's the existing power structures that can't be ignored. But the fact is, more politics happen on the streets, more politics happen in the picket line and the mess room in the workplace. And that's where political discussions have to take place. And on the picket line, the fundamental principle of working class politics is the picket line, I think. If you cross that picket line, then you're a scab. And, no matter whose mate you are, how nice you are, you're a scab. And I think that's how many militants in our union were educated. We were educated in the politics of real power. Us against the employers, us standing with our workmates of different religions, different colours against the employers. That's why, I hope most of our members aren't racist. We saw who the real enemy was the boss. So I'm all for political education, but that doesn't end at a walk through Parliament and an introduction to your local MP.
Oh, and I completely agree, Steve. And I think about how I first got to know you. So I went to Tolpuddle. I ended up camping next to Heatherwood. We then met up at Durham at the Miners' Gala. I then got involved in the Women's Banner Group. And you guys have been my family since then, and I didn't go on a course to get to know you. And we've shared each other's histories from, my history being born and raised in Yorkshire. And I know your history in Durham and Seaham. And I know Heather's history and her story, but the way I've got to know that is by spending time with you, with us spending time with each other and talking and talking about what our lived experience is, and through things like Socialist Think Tank, in which we remain in that solidarity to a slightly wider audience.
Yeah. I think I really like what you were saying as well, both of you, about it being a discussion. And I think people mistake education, and some people are like, right, here's some political education, I'm going to tell you some things. Yeah. And a massive part of education is listening, and you educate one another, don't you? And that you can't learn anything by not listening to people. And I think there's do you think there's like a bit of snobbery around working class people sometimes from people within the movement? Because I know people who just won't really speak to working class people. They'll tell people what working class people should think and what's best for them. Never talk to them. They don't want to talk to working class people. They're a bit scared of them. Oh God!
I'll tell you now. I think that our movement is becoming a place where working class people are being moved out, and I think that's intentional. And I think that what we have is we've got an equalities agenda. We've got equalities for everything except people being working class. Where's the quota of working class people that have to be given jobs or moved on like that? And there's I think there's a real fear amongst the middle classes because they do see us as these lumpins who are all racist and sexist and homophobic, and they really believe that that's what we are, you know. And I think it's, you know, extremely patronizing. And I think that there is, you know, look, people are formed by the society they live in, no matter what class that they're in. And people come to politics and they come to trade unions with all sorts of wrong thinking in their head, you know. And what happens with what used to happen with the trade union movement, that with experience and with talking to people, that would be sort of taken out of them. And now we have people coming in. Well, let's have a safe space in trade unions, and you can't swear, and you can't do this, and you can't do that. So you're setting a bar. Most working class people don't want to attend branch meetings anymore because it's not an atmosphere that they're safe in, that they feel safe and are comfortable in. It's a completely alien atmosphere. And one of the repercussions of that is I think that the only people that are feigning an interest in working class people are the far right, because they'll come along and they'll, instead of trying to talk them out of maybe prejudices people hold, and you know, having that discussion, they'll play on those prejudices and say, well, it's not the boss's fault, it's that Asian's fault next door, it's that Muslim's fault, it's that black person's fault that you haven't got a house. Whereas in the trade union movement, if you know, people might come with those ideas, but what we have to do is have a discussion. And we say, well, actually, it's not. It's the people that make decisions. It's the government. It's the local council. It's the politicians. And behind that, it's the real rulers of this country. So I think there's a real danger at the trade union movement. People, in a lot of instances, working class people are being moved out of it.
Just to add on to what you said there as well, a couple of years ago, there was a big push from the Tory party in education to have a new category, which was white working class boys. Why only white boys got a working class category? Like, you know, when you've got any person can be working class, you know, like the colour of your skin has nothing to do with your class. And I think that was another divisive thing they threw in there, that like, oh, well, you know, that you can only to fit in with that stereotype that you talked about, if it's only white people who are working class and they will therefore be racist and stuff. And it's a really dangerous thing, and it's still hanging around in education at the moment. Like, it is massively worrying that working class people are performing worse at school and working class boys are performing worse at school. I don't think it's the colour of the skin that's making them do that. I think that's the whole working class are struggling with something that's completely alien to them and completely doesn't cater to their needs whatsoever, cater to their interests whatsoever. But I think that you know, that's all part of the same.
Did you see the point is, once you start breaking down the working class, and people will do this on the left, they'll say black working class boys or Asian working class boys, right? Or Asian working class girls. Once you start breaking down that class, the obviously next step is, well, you've named them, so there's a white working class. I mean, that's the logical conclusion of identity politics. If you name everybody else, then the people that are left are white working class, right? So we have to stop thinking. We have to start thinking as a class. I mean, that's what socialists do. We think as a class. But what we can't have is Diane Abbott on the one hand saying, well, black working class boys are suffering, so I've got to move my son to an area where black working class boys don't suffer, and then get up, you know, really upset when people mention white working class boys. I mean, if there's a funding, if there's a crisis in funding with working class education, it's affecting all working class kids, right? White, black, Asian. So more resources should be put into it. But the fact is that the people that are pushing identity politics have to realize that this is a logical conclusion of it.
Really interesting. Okay, is there any more comments coming in, Jane? Because I kind of want to push on to something about the pandemic as well after this. So, anything coming in?
I won't go into my diatribe about intersectionality. I don't 100% agree with Steve, but I agree. With
let's do that. Let's do it, because we always like a little bit of, because we tend to agree on 99% of everything here. So,
of course. Well, no, I mean, I think IDPOL, and that's going to mean different things to different people. It can be quite an explosive area, but I think literally what people think it means and what does it mean. But intersectionality, understanding, essentially one of the points Steve's making is we need to understand each other's lived realities. Right. And as working class people, that is a big common experience. And there are different factors that influence that. And that is what I mean when I say intersectionality. So it's about understanding. And as Paul, you've said, Jane and Steve have said, we have to get to know one another. We can't be strangers. We need to be community and be there. I do think that safeguarding has to play a role. So safe spaces in the light of safeguarding, Steve, I would absolutely advocate for. But I agree with you. I do think that there is an element in the wider trade union movement in which it's not allowing working class people to represent themselves and their class.
Okay, so can I say what my interpretation of intersectionality is?
Sure, go for it.
Well, working class people are oppressed. If you're a black working class person, you're probably going to be more oppressed than a white working class person. If you're a gay working class person, you're going to be more oppressed. So all those, if you're a woman, you're probably going to be more oppressed. You will be, than a male worker. So all those things overlap, right? But what we have is we don't have that. That's true intersectionalism, and it takes account of class politics. What we have in this country and what's being pushed by micro-organizations on the left who've taken up this thing from the States. And by the way, identity politics got masses of money in the campuses in the 1960s and 1970s in the United States. Look where these things have come from. Because Marxists were getting a hold in university campuses. And this was something that was created to detract from it and to counter that. So what they sort of caricature really of intersectionalism is in this country is that you only fight and only somebody who's actually in those shoes can understand oppression. What an absolute load of tosh, right? White working class people in Ireland, right, because there weren't many black working class people, suffered and suffer oppression from this state. You don't need to be black to understand what oppression is, to sympathize with somebody who is black, right? You might not have exactly the same lived experience, but you can understand oppression and you can empathize. I mean, that's the reality. We have people in this country now who are walking around and their mantra is, unless you are actually that person, you don't know what that person feels like, and it's impossible for you to empathize. And I completely disagree with that. I think it disorientates people and it's completely against the class perspective.
I think we're getting largely agreement again now. We're starting.
Oh no!
Don't worry, let's argue again.
But surely that is the fundamental basis of solidarity.
Yeah, I think so. So, Jane, let's go to some comments there. That was, I think that one's sorted.
That was very interesting, though. Paul Smith just made a comment about the fact that he feels the unions have been taken over by the middle classes who see it as a career, and I kind of feel as well that I feel there's a barrier to working class people getting involved in politics and any sort of official structures in this country, because a lot of the time the way working class people might express themselves verbally might not be very acceptable to those structures and might make them very easy game to, to what they've been said being misconstrued, or sometimes maybe what they've said is offensive, but there's a way to deal with that with conversation rather than deciding someone needs to be written off forever. So I think there's a lot of strong feelings about this, and it's a bit of a dangerous one to talk about because I'm always very worried about how I express that opinion if I talk about it, in case I say something incredibly offensive and inconsiderate. So apologies if I have there. Quantum Skyline, I know you wanted to go into the pandemic, Paul, but Quantum Skyline and Neil had a few comments. Quantum Skyline asked about, is there a correlation between the rising cost of train tickets and the public support of workers' rights for fair pay and conditions? So a return ticket for them to London on Monday is going to be nearly £400. And Neil's come back and said, no, obviously there's no correlation. It's just driven by train companies' desire for profits. But I read Quantum Skyline's question to be, is the public perception not are these demands the reason for the rising prices, but do the public perceive it to be that way, do you think? And is that a tool that's used against the unions?
Well, yeah, it certainly is. And I mean, if you look at it, I've quoted already, I don't know if Quantum was in at that point, but for the last 2 years, workers in the train operating companies and Network Rail have had a pay freeze. So that's not contributed to prices and tickets going up at all. What contributed the prices of tickets going up is the £1.5 billion that have been paid out in shares, the people who have had absolutely no responsibility in running the railways at all. They sit at home and they count their share money. So it's obviously something that the Tories and I'd imagine any politician, Blair did it. They try to portray the fact that we by and large earn decent wages, have decent pensions, as the reason for your tickets being so expensive. But that's not the case. I mean, I think it's been proved that if we had a nationalised system and cut out all these middle people, we'd have a far less expensive railway. We would have far more efficient railway. Even the government's own figures show that. There are billions of pounds every year which could be saved by cutting out the contractors. And that's where your money is going. Of course, the media is not going to say that. Whenever we try to raise that, it's never been put across. But that's the reality of it.
I'd also say fundamentally, as a socialist, what I think is right would be public transport free at the point of access.
Yeah.
It looks like that was exactly what you were getting at, like exactly what Quantum Skyline was getting at there, Jane. So well done. The thing, something interesting you said, Jane, that you worry about, saying something that's going to be offending people. I think we've got to get to the point where if someone says something offensive to someone else, you've got to take people at face value. Like, we can't go around saying something offensive doesn't necessarily mean it was intended that way. Sometimes just having that explained to you and saying sorry should be enough. But I think we're living in this ridiculous society where like a little slip up means people being written off. And I'm thinking about people who were like old women and stuff like that in Labour Party meetings who've used the wrong word, and then someone's jumping down the throat and saying you can't say that. Where could have just been easily said, well, we don't really use that word anymore, and they go, sorry, and then move on. Why does it like?
But that's a deliberate policy by the middle class left. They exclude workers from the Labour Party. It's not just the Labour Party. If you look at most of the so-called socialist groups in this country, they've adopted exactly the same thing because they're from the student union. They're from some middle class background, and rather than have class struggle, rather than think as a class because they're not of that class, they want to exclude working class people because they're not comfortable with them being in the same space. To be quite honest.
I mean, Angela Rayner, for one brief second, went up in my estimation when she called Tories scum. And she had to eat her words. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's like, it's not the worst thing that has happened, is it? It's like calling someone scum isn't as bad as actually doing scummy things. So maybe they should, like, if they don't want to be called scum, they should probably do less scummy things.
I mean, it was Tories are scum. She was correct.
Fair. So moving on to the things that Tories have done to really, really damage working class people. I wanted to talk about the pandemic now and how that relates to your action. And then we're going to finish off on talking about how we win, because RMT, I am absolutely delighted to say, you definitely, in my opinion, win a lot. You definitely seem to win for your members, which is a really good thing, and it's something we can all learn from. But at one point during the pandemic, I was looking at things and I was thinking, you know what? Opinions changing. People realise how important these workers are. These people who were out in the middle of the pandemic, people who were working in transport, people who were working in refuse collection, in a lot of cases, teachers, NHS, these people who had to work, all of a sudden went up in everyone's estimation. And now we're seeing a bit of, well, not even a bit, a massive backlash about these people. These are no longer key workers, because remember, they'd just been getting called low skilled by Priti Patel, and then they became key workers, and now we're back to probably being low skilled again in a lot of these jobs that I'm talking about. So, how did we let that happen? And are we going to let it happen, or are we going to do something about reminding people about the people who actually make this country work?
Well, I think what happens, and what's happened on, I've seen it happen on picket lines I've been on, is you have people saying, I wish I got paid this much, or I wish I had those terms and conditions, or I wish I had that. And it goes back to, again, having that dialogue and going, okay, you want to shout at me and walk away, what's the point of that? But do you want to have a chat? Because actually, this is how I achieved that, and you can do that in your workplace. And let's link up and let's speak to each other. I think pitting workers against workers is just a right-wing government going for an easy win, because it distracts us from uniting together and fighting together. And it's been so great to see the solidarity action. So, between UCU and RMT, for example, we have more in common with each other. And it's been great to see that different unions going and supporting different picket lines. And I really do hope that continues. I think it will be vital that we continue to work together as a trade union movement, and a significant amount of which, is not very left-wing at all. We do need to understand that. We need to open our eyes and be quite honest about that, and coordinate together with those people that we do feel reflect our values. You can do your rant about Brendan Barber now, Steve.
Well, I mean, look, I think Arthur Scargill, you mentioned miners' strikes tonight, and I think Arthur Scargill summed it up when somebody said to him, did you realise that on the General Council of the TUC, you had 11 spies and MI5 informers? And Arthur goes, well, I was surprised at that. I thought there'd be many more, and I think that that's probably sums up the TUC and many of the unions out there. I think that they feel that they've got a symbiotic relationship with capitalism. They feel that they are part of the system. People like Brendan Barber, ex-General Secretary of the TUC, is now Sir Brendan Barber, for services like British capitalism or whatever. So I think that the whole trade union movement is in a bloody state. I think that what the pandemic did do is show who really runs society, and they got scared by that, didn't they? The government got scared by that. The rulers of this country got scared by that, because they seen actually that they were superfluous, while the NHS worker, the transport worker, the dust worker wasn't, and that's frightened them. And now, as you say, the backlash has started. They've got to now attack those people, attack that perception that they don't actually function in society. They're not necessary to society where the working class people are.
So how do we change that perception as well? Because we often like to come up with something that we're going to actually do in the future. So how do we make sure that people don't forget, and that we remind people of the people who actually do really help, do make sure, and without which, like, our whole entire system collapses?
Well, I think you're doing it tonight in a small way, aren't you? You're with the very limited resources that you've got. I don't know how many people you've got on there, but we have literature from our class. Every class will write its own version of history, and we need working class people to be writing and recording our version of history. Every victory that we got, every time that we fight back and stop a defeat, we need to record that. We need to record how important we are as working class people in the running of a country, in the running of the world. And, we haven't got the resources. We aren't billionaires. We haven't got those resources. But what we have to do is use which resources we have. And we've got to just keep fighting. We've got to keep going. Ultimately, I'm absolutely certain that there will be an awakening of people. They will see that capitalism is bringing the planet the verge of destruction. And the only way around that is they actually have a socialist society where all our needs are planned for, and we stop the destruction of the planet.
Absolutely. Jane, any comments or comments from you? Let's see what you think first, Jane.
Oh, well, I'm just really grateful to the RMT. What you do is really brave. I'm really fortunate I've never been in a position where I've had to, take part in a strike before, and the thought of it fills me with fear actually. And I'm a bit in awe of just how brave you guys are and the things you do. And Cat, getting up at 3:30 in the morning when you're on holiday, and that's, because you care about other people and you want everyone to have a fair deal. So that gives me a lot of hope there are people doing that.
Yeah. And any comments from people at home that have popped in?
We've not had much during that last bit. I think people were all a bit mesmerised by Steve's talking. I wanted to say thank you to Mia because she put a comment in before that says that she worries too all the time about whether she might say something offensive or outrageous. So thank you for that solidarity, Mia. I appreciate that. It's not just me.
Okay, so let's move on to the very final bit. Before we do like some closing comments. So this is about winning. So RMT, you've had some wins. Tell us about a few of the wins that you've had, why you've won, and what's made the difference in your strike action or your solidarity. I think I'm probably trying to give away what I think the answer to this is by using the word solidarity there. But, what is special about the RMT? Why are you getting so many wins?
There's nothing special about us. We're just like you. We're just ordinary people. What the difference is in a lot of the occasions is that when we go on strike, everybody knows because your train stopped running, your buses stopped running, or your tubes stopped running. But I think there are people out there that are equally fighting back the same as us. But we have an ethos, and it was, I think, expounded by, or certainly popularised by Bob Crow, and that is if you fight, you sometimes lose, but if you don't fight, you will always lose. And I think Sun Tzu in The Art of War actually started that off, but Bob popularised it, let's say. And I think that's our ethos as a trade union. If you're going to be attacked, there's no guarantee of victory. I mean, with the guards disputes, there's still guards in some form on every train. Might not be with the terms and conditions we wanted to. But if we hadn't have fought, if we hadn't been prepared in some instances to take 70 days of sustained action, those guards would all be gone now. You wouldn't have any safety on trains because the guards would be gone. Same with Cat can expand upon this. On the stations on London Underground, we got 600 jobs back. When they cut those 600 jobs by taking sustained industrial action. And we build relations with passenger groups, we build relations with other trade unions and other trades councils and people who will support us and show us solidarity. But really, the strategy has to be built around taking effective industrial action. That's you can't get away from that. That is the crux of it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like 2016 was the Fit for the Future dispute, which I think Steve was talking about on London Underground, and that's when you remember at the time the mayor was Boris Johnson, and in his manifesto to get elected, he said he would not close a single ticket office, and he then became the mayor of London, and he then closed every single ticket office. Now, we fought and we won, and during different stages, it was with other unions, and then we were out on our own. And we got it equated to 600 jobs, but on paper, I think it was 450 jobs back out of that dispute. That was a direct result. And I directly felt the impact of that because we still had a great loss to our system. We lost all of the ticket offices basically went. So we won, but the kind of service that we provided was genuinely severely impacted. And essentially, from what I can tell, from what TfL are proposing that they would like to do is they're trying to achieve what they did back in 2016 and didn't get away with it. And we will fight them every step of the way.
So is that why you think you win? Because you will fight them every step of the way?
Well, you can't hesitate, and we need to educate each other and support each other and be there. And branches are communities. You've just got to put one foot in front of the other and get the work done. And you know what? Get up early, go on a picket line. I know where Steve's going next. He's going to a picket line tonight. That's the right thing. You don't have to think too much about it. You just need to go and do it. And you know what? Put some checks and balances in place. We, as activists, we exhaust ourselves really easily. Burnout is a thing. be there for each other, understand it, but just fucking do it.
Jane, there's a quick question coming, which I would be really interested in the answer.
Yeah, is that Quantum Skyline? Any recommendations for how workers can come together when their employer doesn't support or recognise unions?
Yeah, you can get if 50% of the workers want to be in a union, then the employers don't have any choice. The union goes to something called a Central Arbitration Committee, CAC. And if 50% of the workplace wants to be in a union, you'll get recognition not straight away, but you will get recognition. So the main thing is to go along and approach a trade union, get a trade union to come along, appropriate to your workplace, and somebody will come in and help organise those workers.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
I didn't know that either. That's a brilliant answer. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all each in turn now for some closing comments, and then we'll call it a night. Thank you so much, everyone, by the way, for your comments at home. Really, really good. And thank you on behalf of Socialist Think Tank to the entire panel. You've been absolutely brilliant. Jane, I'm going to start with you.
I just wanted to go back to what Kat just said, branches of communities, and that really struck me because I just feel we've lost that sense of community so much over, I don't know, the last 40 decades, and that's a really nice way to look at it, and I'm sure there's a huge amount of truth in that, and that's something I'm going to be thinking about.
Brilliant. And Kat?
Yeah, I mean, more of this. We are community, and I'd encourage anyone like London Transport Region, RMT, if there's something going on in London you want us to know about and we can show solidarity with you, let us know. We'll be there. We'll be there to support you. And please come and support us on our picket lines. And there are picket lines tonight. There are picket lines next weekend. There will be picket lines next year. Come and join us and let us know how we can support you. So solidarity, unity really is strength.
Brilliant. Steve, which picket line are you going to tonight?
Leytonstone. Night tube picket line up at Leytonstone. So I'll be going up there. I got my coat on. They've just given me a phone call. I'm a bit late. That's your fault. I'll blame you.
Well, we appreciate it.
But the sort of closing comment is this: there's no one coming in a white horse to save you. Corbynism's finished. It's failed. They weren't strong enough. They didn't provide enough leadership. They weren't ruthless enough with the snakes in the fifth column in their own organisation. You're going to have to do it for yourself. You have to get off your backside and organise for yourself. It's all right sitting here getting ideas tonight, but you need to bring those ideas back into the workplace, back into your community, and get people organised, because they're coming for us and we need to fight back.
Thank you so much. And as I say, on behalf of Socialist Think Tank, we really appreciate it. If you want to become a member of Socialist Think Tank, it is free. We want people to get involved. Take it easy, Steve. See you later. I'll just quickly change this so I can do this bit. So if you want to become a member of Socialist Think Tank, you can. It is free, or you can give a donation if you want. Either way, we're socialists. We don't treat you any differently, but we do appreciate everything that you do. If you're listening back on the podcast, you can make a comment, or you can just subscribe to our podcast and stuff. There's lots and lots of you from around the world who do listen to that. And send us a message if you want to on our website, contact@socialistthinktank.com. Send us a message if you listen to the podcast and enjoying it. If you ever have any questions, any suggestions about future shows, we really, really do appreciate all of your input. Thank you so much for everyone who is watching tonight, who has watched tonight. Please do share this video, share this around, tell people about it, and subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Twitch and Twitter, and like us on Facebook, and also join our Discord channel, which you can do after becoming a member of Socialist Think Tank. Listen back to all of our stuff. We probably have more content than anyone going, and that probably includes the likes of Novara Media, etc., because we have absolutely loads of it. So go and enjoy it. We have all sorts of different shows. Origins, which is about people's relationship with socialism. What is socialism to you is the question there, and we have so many brilliant people on there that you can learn so much from. We also have some shows called Social Ties, which are about community groups and people who are doing things and actions people are taking. And we also have Political Unmuted, which will be on Tuesday. It's our last one of the year on Tuesday coming up. A variety of different guests. You can vote on what topics that we're going to talk about then. Yeah, that's always a good show, hosted by John D. Clare. And yeah, we'll probably be back for Socialist Night Live next week, and we might do something over Christmas. And sometimes we do weird things like me and Dan having a chat over on Twitch, which is again quite bizarre and unplanned. We really should tell people about things like that. Anyway, have a really, really good night, everyone. Thank you so much to the panel, and solidarity to you all. And we will see you soon once I have found this last little jingle. Take care, everyone.
Keep the red flag flying.